I'm Alex, and I was on a camping trip with my friend Jake, deep in the rugged wilderness of the Appalachian Mountains. We were both seasoned outdoorsmen, having braved countless trails and campfires over the years. The air was growing colder as the day's light began to fade, leaving us in the gathering darkness. We had set up camp by a small, meandering creek, surrounded by towering pines that blocked out the sky. The forest around us was alive with the rustling of leaves, but there was something unsettling about the silence that lingered beneath it all. As we huddled around the campfire, cooking up our dinner, I noticed Jake's uneasy expression. He stared out into the woods, his gaze fixed on something I couldn't see. "Everything all right?" I asked, trying to hide my own growing unease. Jake hesitated before responding. "Yeah, it's just... I thought I heard something earlier, like footsteps." I strained my ears, listening intently. Sure enough, I could hear faint, distant sounds, like the snapping of twigs underfoot. It was faint, but it was there. "Maybe it's just some wildlife," I suggested, trying to reassure us both. We continued our meal, but the noises persisted, growing closer and more distinct. They were definitely not the soft, stealthy sounds of a deer or a squirrel. It was as if someone or something was deliberately approaching our camp. Jake stood up, his hand instinctively reaching for a nearby branch that he had fashioned into a makeshift club. I followed suit, my heart pounding as the sounds drew nearer. That's when we heard it. A voice, low and guttural, whispering in the darkness. It was too muffled to make out any words, but the tone was menacing, sending a chill down my spine. We scanned the trees, our flashlights cutting through the inky blackness. Then we saw it, a figure shrouded in darkness, standing just beyond the edge of our campsite. It was a person, but their presence felt anything but friendly. "Who's there?" Jake called out, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to advance toward us, step by deliberate step. Panic surged through us, and we retreated, stumbling backward in the direction of our tents. We could hear the intruder following us, their footsteps growing louder and more menacing. The voice continued to mutter incoherently, sending a wave of dread washing over us. We finally reached our tents, fumbling to unzip the openings and crawl inside. We could hear the intruder circling our campsite, their shadowy presence haunting us like a malevolent spirit. Hours passed, with us huddled in our tents, clutching our makeshift weapons and listening to the relentless pacing outside. Eventually, the footsteps and the whispering ceased, and the woods fell silent once more. Morning brought no trace of the intruder, and we wasted no time in packing up and leaving the campsite behind. We never found out who or what had invaded our solitude that night, but the memory of that chilling encounter still lingers. My name is Emily, and my close friend Daniel and I embarked on a camping trip deep in the heart of the Oregon wilderness. We were both avid nature enthusiasts, seeking a weekend away from our hectic lives in the city to reconnect with the tranquility of the great outdoors. Our chosen campsite was nestled beside a pristine lake, surrounded by dense pine forests. The air was crisp and invigorating, the scent of pine needles and damp earth filling our senses. We set up our camp and started a crackling campfire, eager for a night of stargazing and storytelling. As the twilight shadows lengthened, we marveled at the celestial display above us. The Milky Way stretched across the sky, a shimmering river of stars. But our peaceful reverie was soon disrupted by an unusual sound, echoing through the forest, distant chanting voices. Daniel and I exchanged puzzled glances. There should have been no one else around for miles. Intrigued, we decided to investigate, arming ourselves with flashlights. The chanting led us deeper into the woods, and we soon discovered a small clearing bathed in an eerie, flickering light. In the center, a group of people, dressed in flowing robes, stood in a tight circle. They held candles that cast bizarre and unsettling shadows across their faces. Their voices were hypnotic and melodic, their words a strange, ancient language that sent a chill down my spine. The atmosphere in that clearing was thick with a palpable energy, and the people seemed utterly absorbed in their strange ritual. As we watched from the shadows, Daniel accidentally stepped on a twig, causing a loud snap that echoed through the stillness. All at once, the group of chanters turned to face us, their eyes gleaming with an uncanny intensity. Panic surged through us, and we turned to flee, but it was too late. They began to follow us through the woods, their eerie chant growing louder and more fervent. We stumbled over roots and rocks, our flashlights trembling in our hands as we desperately tried to find our way back to our campsite. The pursuit was relentless, the circle of people never faltering in their pursuit. We could feel their presence closing in on us, their voices echoing through the darkened forest, sending shivers down our spines. Finally, we burst into the clearing where our campsite lay, gasping for breath. We quickly packed up our belongings and fled into the night, our hearts pounding, the haunting chant fading into the distance. We never looked back, never discovered the purpose of that eerie circle in the woods. But the memory of being pursued by those mysterious chanting figures still haunts our dreams. My family had decided to camp deep in the heart of the dense forest, not far from a clearing where a party was scheduled to take place that evening. My parents had decided to take a short hike to gather firewood before the sun dipped below the horizon. They assured me they would be back soon and told me to stay put in the tent. I was 12 years old at the time, and while I had always been a little apprehensive about being alone in the woods, I felt a sense of adventure that evening. I zipped up the tent, cocooning myself inside with a flashlight and a book to pass the time. The forest was eerily quiet, and the only sound was the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Darkness began to fall, and the forest took on an entirely different character. As I read my book, I heard something outside. It was a faint rustling sound like someone stepping on dry leaves. I held my breath and strained my ears to listen. Perhaps it was just an animal, I thought. But then, I heard it again. Closer this time, and distinctly human. "Mom? Dad?" I called out, my voice trembling with uncertainty. There was no response, just the chilling silence of the woods. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, and the rustling outside persisted. Panic gnawed at the edges of my mind. I grabbed the flashlight and shone it toward the source of the noise. What I saw made my heart skip a beat. A silhouette, tall and hunched, was lurking just beyond the tent's entrance. My hands trembled as I called out once more. "Mom? Dad, is that you?" The figure didn't respond, and I could feel its eyes fixed on me, staring through the thin fabric of the tent. My fear turned to terror as I realized that whoever was out there was not my parents. The figure's shape seemed off, distorted, and malevolent. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice quivering with fear. Still, no response. The figure just stood there, watching, waiting. I couldn't take it any longer. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I unzipped the tent's door and bolted out into the night. As I sprinted away from the tent, I could hear footsteps behind me, pursuing me through the darkness. Tears streamed down my face as I ran blindly through the forest, desperate to escape the lurking presence. My mind raced with horrifying thoughts of what might have happened if I had stayed in that tent any longer. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the forest, where I finally felt safe enough to slow down. My parents eventually returned to the campsite, their faces etched with worry when they found me. I told them everything, and we quickly packed up our things and left the forest that night, vowing never to return. To this day, I can't forget the unsettling feeling of being watched, the chilling silhouette outside the tent, and the terrifying realization that the person lurking in the darkness was not my father.